Netless. Yyth had never known stone walls or fixed roofs. Her world was canvas tents, the stink of hay and sweat, the tang of iron pegs and rope burns. By the time she could stand, her mother had set her feet on a balance line, strung between two stools. By the time she could speak, her father had taught her to call the dogs with a whistle sharp enough to pierce through drums. The traveling circus was her family, her town, her cathedral. Her world smelled of roasted chestnuts, of sawdust kicked up by horses, of the grease paint the clowns rubbed into their cracks and wrinkles, and her world was music, flutes, fiddles, the crack of whips, the rhythm of applause. She grew nimble on the wire. She sewed her own costumes, from scraps of velvet and silk, bright reds and blues, to catch the torchlight. She cooked stews for the younger apprentices when her mother was too tired. She danced in the final act, a whirl of motion, and when the dogs leapt through hoops of flame, it was Yyth who steadied them with voice and hand. It was a life of constant movement, but it was a life of belonging. Until the night of the fire. The flames came without warning, and too fast to be the accident everyone first believed. It began in the animal cages, a sudden bloom of orange that raced up the canvas walls before the troop could even shout. Horses screamed, elephants trumpeted, lions roared, then the smoke drowned all sound. Yyth remembered the heat most of all. The way it curled her hair, the way her lungs fought for air. She stumbled through choking blackness, dragging a child by the arm, kicking her way past falling beams. She remembered reaching the edge of the meadow, her feet raw, her hands blistered. By dawn the circus was ash. Her father, her mother, her two brothers, they did not come stumbling out. The animals were bones and cinders. The great tent poles lay charred like blackened teeth against the sky. She was 16 years old, alone, and everything she knew had burned. The ringmaster, they said, had survived. Cadian, the self-styled lord of spectacle, with his silver buttons and long curling beard. He gathered the survivors, half a dozen or so, around a wagon 2 nights later. "We rebuild," he said. "The fire was tragedy, yes, but tragedy makes the crowd generous. We will play the sympathy, and we will rise again." His eyes fell on Yyth. She felt the weight of that stare like another fire. Later that night, when he called her to his wagon, she thought perhaps he wished to speak of her family. She entered, nervous but hopeful, her patched skirt still reeking of smoke. Cadian poured her wine. He spoke of her talent, her beauty, her future. Then he set his heavy hand on her thigh. "You have lost everything, Yyth," he murmured. "But I will keep you. The ring needs a jewel. Be mine, and you will shine brighter than ever." Her throat closed. She pulled back, muttered excuses. He caught her wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. "Your mother would have wished it," he hissed. "Better to be with me than alone." She fled before he could trap her. She ran into the cold night, the stars sharp above her, and she knew she would never return. For 3 days she wandered, numb with grief and fear. She had no coin, no bread, nothing but the ragged clothes she wore. Her hands ached for the wire, her throat for laughter, but the road was empty. The circus had always been her wall against the world. Without it, she was defenseless. But the world did not leave her in peace. She saw guards on the roads now, heavy with mail and crossbows. Lord Yyth had begun tightening his grip on the outer lands, sending soldiers and tacksmen even to the countryside. Wagons were stopped, farmers questioned, beggars whipped. It was one of those guards she first noticed. A Yyth man, judging by the leather tunic with the blazoned R. He walked with his crossbow slung carelessly, the weapon gleaming in the sunlight. She had never fired such a thing, but she knew the balance of weight, the rhythm of muscle and breath. To walk the wire was to know gravity's laws better than any man. She could learn this too, and more importantly, she would have a weapon. The road of strangers. Yyth did not speak to anyone as she skirted the main road, hugging the shadows of the pines. The fire had stripped her of all belonging, yet it had given her a strange freedom. She had learned to move silently among trapezes and ropes, to step lightly on boards and stones. Now she applied that knowledge to the forest floor, her bare feet brushing needles and moss without a sound. She knew the risks. A lone girl in tattered skirts would not survive long if she trusted strangers, nor could she appeal to any local lord. Most towns along the outer roads were patrolled by Yyth's soldiers. Their polished leather armor and rigid formation, a wall against any wanderer. Travelers were checked, wagons searched, and pockets picked clean by anyone careless enough to linger. Hunger gnawed at her. She had survived on roots and berries the first night, on water trickling from mossy stones. The second night she found a rabbit snared by a careless hunter and boiled it over a fire, using a scrap of cloth as a potholder. She realized she could cook, she could feed herself, but she had no protection if the road turned violent. And the Yyth man appeared, as if conjured by necessity. He was tall, his hair pale like winter wheat, and his crossbow gleamed in the morning sun. He walked with a measured pace, his boots crunching against the gravel. He paused, glanced down a side path, then looked back, distracted. Yyth froze, then edged closer, heart hammering. Her hands brushed the grass as she crawled along the bank. Her mind worked in leaps. The weight of the crossbow, the rhythm of pulling the string, the leverage of the stock. She had never held one, but she had walked wires above fiery hoops and vaulted through trapezes. Balance and strength, she knew, were universal. By the time she was within reach, she had a plan. She would not kill him. That was not her way, yet. But she would take what she needed. A sudden gust of wind, a bird startled from the branches. The man spun, hand on the bolt, but Yyth was quicker. She lunged, her fingers curling around the polished wood. The Yyth struggled, cursed in his clipped tones, but she had learned leverage and momentum from years swinging over ropes and rings. With a twist, a grunt, she wrenched the crossbow free. "Wait!" he shouted. "I said wait," she murmured, almost laughing, her pulse roaring. "I didn't hear a question." She ran before he could recover, sprinting down the side path, her skirt snagging on brambles, bare feet slapping against the stones. The crossbow felt heavy, but reassuring in her hands, a tangible promise that she could protect herself now. The Yyth man's shouts receded, swallowed by the trees. For the first time since the fire, she felt power. Not the nimble performative power of the wire or the grace of dance, but the raw, dangerous power of a weapon in her hands. She had taken, yes, stolen, but necessity justified it. Survival demanded it. Night fell, and she camped beside a small stream, fashioning a crude bolt quiver from her torn skirts. The crossbow was unwieldy at first, but she practiced loading and aiming, imagining targets in the moonlight. The water mirrored her own face, pale, sharp-featured, eyes wide and calculating. She did not recognize the girl reflected there. The circus Yyth, the girl who could charm animals, dance for applause, sow beauty into life, was gone, or at least buried beneath ash and survival instinct. Her nights became exercises in stealth. She learned which paths were patrolled, which inns welcomed wanderers, which forests were safe for a fire without drawing unwanted eyes. She scavenged for food, for shelter, for scraps of coin left in abandoned wagons. Sometimes, she hunted small game, practicing with the stolen crossbow. Each arrow fired gave her a flicker of confidence she had not felt since before the fire. She thought of the ringmaster often. Cadian's lust, his words pressed into her memory, were more than a wound, they were a scar she would carry. And yet, she understood something bitter and necessary. The world was full of monsters, and she had no choice but to become one in turn. The circus had trained her body, her mind, her nerves, but not for this road. This road demanded cunning, stealth, and sometimes cruelty, and she would learn it all. A fortnight into her wandering, she came across another wagon, heavily guarded, trundling slowly through a shaded valley. The guards were armored, weapons ready, eyes like hawks scanning for stragglers or thieves. Yyth watched from the trees, calculating. Hunger pressed at her stomach, but more than hunger pressed at her pride. She would not beg. She would not be caught. She would find a way to survive. Her fingers curled around the crossbow. The leather straps cut into her palms, but she grinned, a flash of her old daring. The world had changed, but Hylcina had adapted. A wirewalker never falls completely, not if she knows where the line is. And this road, as dangerous as it was, had taught her a new rhythm, a new way to move unseen, unheard, untouchable. For now, the Yyth man. Hylcina had hoped the Yyth man would fade from memory, swallowed by forest shadows or lost along the winding roads. But shadows rarely forget, and men rarely forgive a slight to their pride, or their possessions. 3 nights after the theft, she spotted him again. The moon was thin, a silver sickle in the sky, and the forest was quiet, but for the rustle of leaves and the whisper of wind. Hylcina had slept fitfully, curled against the trunk of a birch, crossbow by her side. When she glimpsed the pale hair and glinting crossbow in the clearing ahead, her heart seized, not with fear, but with the electric thrill of a predator who finally meets her equal. The Yyth man had learned too. His eyes were sharper now, scanning every shadow, every twitch of leaf and branch. But Hylcina had learned also, had studied him from a distance, had memorized his steps, the rhythm of his patrol. Her bare feet barely whispered over the mossy earth. She let him pass once, then again, studying his manner. His arrogance was slower now, caution sharpened like the steel of his bow. Finally, when he crouched to drink from a stream, Hylcina struck. A bolt whispered from the crossbow, embedding itself in a tree trunk beside his head. He sprang up, eyes wide, and she stood from her concealment, voice clear. "Not this time," she said. The Yyth man cursed, adjusting his stance. Hylcina could see now the lean muscle beneath the pale skin, the tension coiled in every limb. She had faced animals in the circus that could tear her apart without a second thought. But this was different. This was man, clever and fast, and armed. "You stole from me," he said, voice low and cold. "Give it back, girl, and I may let you live. I need it more than you do," Hylcina said simply. Her lips curved in a grim smile, the first in weeks. "You can take your pride, but the weapon stays." They circled, both aware of every twig underfoot, every shadow among the trees. Hylcina realized then that this was no mere theft. It was a test, and the stakes were higher than any trapeze act, any wire walking performance. She had never killed anyone, not yet, but she understood instinctively how close she had come to being struck down. He lunged, attempting to catch her off guard, but she ducked, rolling along the moss. She fired another bolt, aimed not to kill but to warn, to show her skill. The Yyth man yelped as it grazed his shoulder, the sting enough to make him stagger. Hylcina seized the moment, rushing toward the underbrush and disappearing into the shadows. The chase lasted the better part of an hour. Hylcina's lungs burned, her legs ached, but she had the advantage, familiarity. With movement, the instincts honed from years on wire and trapeze. She scaled trees, leapt over fallen logs, twisted her body through spaces too small for a full-grown man. The Yyth man cursed with each failed attempt, his pride turning into frustration. Finally, she reached a stream wide enough to mask her trail. She waded through the cold water, letting it cover her scent and erase her steps. When she emerged on the other bank, she dared a glance behind. The Yyth man had stopped at the edge, scanning, realizing she had eluded him, for now. Hylcina sank against a rock, gasping for breath. The adrenaline still surged in her veins, her body shaking from exertion and fear. She felt a strange satisfaction. She had survived, outwitted, and claimed her weapon. And yet, for the first time, she recognized a dark truth about herself. The circus had taught her to entertain, to charm, to amuse. It had taught her loyalty and skill and courage. But the road taught something else, cunning, ruthlessness, and the cold calculus of survival. She had stolen, she had wounded, she had outrun a man twice her size. And she had enjoyed it. It was not a joy of cruelty. It was a thrill of capability. Hylcina felt alive in a way she had never known within the safety of the circus tents. For the first time, she realized the full measure of her independence. No master, No ringmaster, no troop could ever bind her again. She began to plan. Food, shelter, coin and safety would be her new performance. Her body, trained in grace and balance, would be her weapon. Her mind, sharpened by memorization, timing and instinct, would be her guide. And the crossbow, the cold, heavy instrument of precision, would be her edge against the cruelty of a world that had burned her family alive. That night, beneath a sky streaked with clouds and silver light, Yyth promised herself something fierce and simple. She would survive. She would grow stronger. She would never again be prey. And she would never forget the fire, or the ringmaster, or the man who chased her through the forest. The road was wide, dangerous, and uncertain. But for the first time, Yyth walked it, not as a girl who had lost everything, but as a survivor who had taken what she needed, and lived to tell the tale. Paths between. The forest deepened, until light itself seemed to thin into threads of gold and silver. Yyth moved carefully, one hand on the old strap of her travel bag, the other, brushing aside, leaves that gleamed faintly, though no sun reached them. Her body was weary, boots caked with mud, hair knotted from too many nights on the road, but something in her chest kept pressing forward, a tug not of logic, but of some promise ahead. She stumbled into a glade, and at once her eyes widened. The air shimmered like heat over stone, though it was cool enough for mist. Tiny figures darted through that shimmer, winged, radiant, not birds, but neither entirely human. The fairies of old songs, of whispered warnings, danced here in spiral patterns, their laughter ringing like bells struck underwater. "Ho! Our long legs!" one of them cried in a voice both sharp and sweet. "She creaks," another giggled, hovering near Yyth's ear. "Hear the knees, like old doors." Before Yyth could gather her wits to protest, 3 fairies swooped, close, and tugged at her sleeve, testing the fabric, then darting away. She nearly fell from the sudden flurry, but caught herself with a bow of her head. "I mean no harm," she said. "I only seek rest, a little food if it is your way to offer it." The fairies circled, whispering to one another, in a language half chimes, half chirps. Then, from higher up, a brighter presence drifted downward, her wings longer, her glow steadier. "A mortal girl," the elder fairy sang. "She smells of iron and road dust, yet no malice." "None," Yyth confirmed, keeping her voice level. The elder waved her wand-like twig. At once, the air thickened with scent, honey, dew, roasted nuts. Fairies carried platters woven of bark and moss, set with food that sparkled as though dusted with morning frost. Yyth's stomach clenched with hunger, and she let herself be guided to a low seat grown of living roots. She ate slowly at first, fruit that dripped juice sweeter than anything she'd tasted, bread crumbly and warm though no oven was in sight, nuts that popped in her mouth with tiny flashes of light. The fairies giggled at her carefulness, pushing more onto her plate. She chews like a cow. No, no, like a priest with too much sermon in his teeth. Their laughter was not cruel, only bubbling over with their own delight. That night, they laid her on a bed of moss. Fireflies wove themselves into constellations above, casting light soft enough to ease her bones. The fairies sang lullabies that were less words than harmonies, threads weaving into her dreams. She slept as she hadn't since childhood, waking only once when a fairy tugged gently at her braid and whispered, "South, south, south, find Clover Crest." For 2 nights they sheltered her, feeding her strange but nourishing food, plaiting her hair with clover blossoms, painting her cheeks with tiny strokes of pollen. When she prepared to leave, the elder fairy floated before her, wings dimmed in farewell. "Southward the meadows lie. Seek Clover Crest. There, what you need shall begin." Yyth bowed low. "You've given me more kindness than I deserve. I'll remember it." "Mortals never remember," a younger fairy giggled. "Sometimes they do," the elder said softly. Clover Crest. The road south led her into wide fields, where the ground rose and dipped in shallow hills, every hollow thick with clover. The scent was heady, sweet, almost intoxicating. Hilsina pressed onward, until she heard music unlike any human hand could coax. Pipes and drums, but wilder, off-tempo, brimming with both joy and discord. The satyrs of Clover Crest appeared then. Horns curled from their foreheads, their goat legs carrying them with bounding steps. They laughed, argued, sang, all in one breath. One plucked a stringed instrument with vigor, while another shouted over him about whose turn it was to fetch ale. They spotted her, and at once the arguments shifted. A stranger, a human. Bah, don't trust them. Perhaps she brings news. Or wine. Their eyes were sharp, gleaming with mischief and suspicion alike. Hilsina raised her hands in peace. I was told to seek Clover Crest. I seek only shelter, and I can pay with labor if need be. The satyrs glanced at one another, then the tallest, with horns polished smooth, barked a laugh. Shelter we have, mortal. Labor we need. But more than anything, we need drink. Our barrels run dry, and without wine, we'll soon tear each other apart. The others bleated in agreement, half serious, half jesting. They led her deeper into Clover Crest, and there she saw it, a hollow ringed with trees, a meadow carpeted in clover so dense it seemed like green water. At its heart lay the griffin. Once it might have soared like storm clouds, wings spanning the sky. Now, one wing bent oddly, broken long ago, and never healed. Its feathers dulled to grey, its leonine body scarred. Yet its eyes, deep amber, unyielding, watched with pride unbroken. This is Rathos, a satyr said with uncharacteristic reverence, guardian of our refuge. Flightless now, but wisdom enough for all. The griffin inclined its head slightly, acknowledging her presence without a word. Hilsina bowed, respect rising in her chest. Clover Crest pulsed with life. Satyrs bickered over music, meals, who had eaten more than his share. They drank what little remained of their wine, sighing that it dulled the constant itch of living together. Without it, one confided to Hilsina, we'd claw each other raw. Too much satyr in one place, wine keeps us tolerable. That night they feasted with what little they had, inviting Hilsina to sit among them. She listened to their quarrels, their sudden bursts of laughter, their endless demand for more wine. At last the tallest satyr leaned close. Go to Seward, human girl. They'll sell to your kind. Bring us wine, and you'll have place here. Fail, and, well, we'll find another fool. Hilsina lay awake later, staring at the stars beyond the canopy. A simple errand it seemed, but then the thought pressed in, if she could buy for them, could she not buy for others? There must be countless non-humans, hiding from towns that scorned them, all needing goods only humans could freely purchase. The idea grew slowly, cautiously, but steadily. She, Hilsina of no settled home, might become the bridge, the face, who dealt with merchants, carried goods across borders of distrust. The next morning, she voiced her thought aloud, testing it like a blade. If I do this for you, why not for others? I could serve as go-between. The satyrs perked their ears, some scoffing, others nodding. It would save us the stink of humans, one muttered. But what's her price? Another demanded. Hilsina smiled faintly. Fair trade. I'll not bleed myself dry. You want wine, I'll fetch it, but I'll take what makes the risk worthwhile. Rathos, the griffin, stirred then, his deep voice breaking the chatter. A bridge is fragile. Step lightly, girl. But a bridge once built may outlast both banks. The words sank into her, heavy with meaning. And so it began. She rose, shouldered her crossbow, and prepared for Seward. Not as beggar, nor as mere wanderer, but as something new, liaison, broker. One who might balance between worlds that refused to meet eye to eye. The fairy's laughter still echoed in her ears as she stepped into the road. Southward, forward, into a plan that might yet become a calling. Burden of barrels. The barrels looked smaller when she first agreed to purchase them. Perhaps it was the way the merchant's lantern cast shadows across the casks in the dim, lit storehouse, or perhaps it was the haste with which she counted out her coins. In truth, she had thought little of the matter beyond the simple calculation. 4 barrels of wine, the price, fair enough, the quality suitable for satyrs who demanded strong drink to dull their constant bickering. What she had not considered, what now stood glaring in front of her in the raw morning light, was how impossibly heavy they would be to move without cart, beast or company. Hylsina leaned her back against one of the casks, braced her boots in the dirt, and pushed. The barrel groaned and shifted, rolling half a turn before coming to rest against the lip of a cobblestone gutter. She wiped her brow, strands of dark hair sticking to her cheek. The distance to Clovercrest was not far in thought, but every road seemed longer when burdened. 4 barrels would take her a week to wrestle, if she didn't collapse in the attempt. She muttered aloud. Brilliant, Hill. Sell your sweat before you've sold the wine. A few children on the corner watched her struggle with the wide-eyed fascination reserved for fools and performers. One of them, a girl with a straw doll, clapped when Hylsina nearly tipped the cask upright. Their mother barked at them to move along, shooting Hylsina a look that was half suspicion, half pity. Outsiders were not trusted in Seward, least of all those with strange accents and restless eyes, but Hylsina was no stranger to impossible burdens. She had lived her life on the wire, walking slender threads of rope high above jeering crowds. Balance was her bread, patience her shield. She would not be bested by a few barrels. Still, patience did not conjure wagons, nor did balance breed horses. She needed help. The first favor. She started with the cooper who had sold her the wine. A plump man with sawdust clinging to his apron, he stood beside his workshop door, already splitting staves for another barrel. "You fine goods here," Hylsina began, attempting charm. "Would you not lend me the means to carry them?" The cooper shook his head. "I sell barrels, not legs, nor carts. But perhaps you know someone." "Everyone knows someone. What matters is coin." He lifted a stave, squinting down its length. "Coin I suspect you do not have after buying 4 casks at once." Hylsina could not argue. Her purse was flat, and she had spent nearly all her money securing the wine for Clovercrest. She offered instead, "I sew. Seamstress by trade. I can mend your household's clothes, patch sails, stitch leather. Give me a hand with transport, and I'll see your family dressed like nobility." The cooper chuckled. "My wife would like that well enough. But I've no cart to lend you. Try the wheelwright across the square, Gil. He's always bored, might take pity if you spin him a tale." So it was that Hylsina first heard the name that would come to matter. Gil the Wainwright. Gil's workshop stood beneath an open awning where wheels of every size leaned against the walls like suns frozen mid-rise. He was a lanky fellow with sandy hair, his hands blackened by tar and resin, though his clothes were surprisingly neat. At her approach, he looked up from a half-finished cartbed and greeted her not with suspicion, but with a long sigh of relief. "Finally," he said, "someone who isn't asking for chicken coops or fence repairs." "What is it you need, traveller?" Hylsina blinked at the ease of his tone. "Transport. 4 barrels of wine." His eyebrows rose. 4? That's half a wagon load. Half a wagon load too many for my back, she admitted. Gil studied her for a moment, then grinned crookedly. "I'll help you. But I'm bored, you see, and boredom is a tax to be paid in stories. Tell me how a seamstress and acrobat comes to buy so much wine in a town that barely trusts foreigners." Hylsina hesitated, considering how much truth to share. Then she shrugged. "It's for friends, the kind who cannot buy for themselves. Call it a courier's duty." Gil leaned on his workbench. "A smuggler's errand, then." "Not smuggling," she said quickly. "Bartering. Mending bridges with bottles." He laughed. "Whatever name you give it, I'll play along. But you'll need more than me. 4 barrels aren't lifted by 2 arms." And so began the chain of errands, each favor tied to another like links in an endless chain. The fetching of hands. Gil led her first to the stablemaster, claiming they might hire a mule for the day. The stablemaster, however, refused outright. "Not for outsiders. Last time I lent my beasts, they came back lame." "But surely," Hylsina began. "Unless," the stablemaster added, You could rid my hayloft of sparrows, vermin, stealing grain faster than I can buy it. Drive them out, and perhaps I'll consider. Hilsina almost laughed. She had balanced upon wires above screaming crowds, faced jeering drunks and lustful ringmasters, and now she was to chase birds. Still, work was work. She climbed into the loft, clapped her hands, shouted, even waved a bit of cloth until the sparrows flew shrieking into the sky. When she emerged, hair full of straw, the stablemaster grudgingly agreed to lend her a mule, for a fee. A small fee, yes, but still more than she possessed. Gil scratched his chin. We'll need another angle. The next attempt was the brewer, who owned several carts. The brewer listened, then said, My cart's wheel is cracked. Fix it, and I'll lend it. Gil's eyes lit with challenge. A cracked wheel? That's work for me. But when they inspected the wheel, Gil discovered he lacked the right kind of oak spoke. I'll need wood, green oak, not dry. Which led them to the forester on the town's edge. The forester agreed to spare a length of oak, if only someone would mend his torn jerkin. At this, Hilsina smiled. Needle and thread were her realm. She spent the afternoon stitching the forester's worn garment, adding a touch of embroidery at the cuffs for pride's sake. In return, he gave them the oak, which Gil shaped into a spoke, which he fitted to the brewer's wheel. The cart was mended, yet the brewer too demanded coin for the loan. So it went, from one task to another. The baker asked her to deliver a basket of loaves to a widow. The widow requested her roof thatch be secured before rains. The thatcher wanted new laces for his boots. The cobbler offered laces, but only if she carried a letter to his cousin. By the end of 2 days, Hilsina was half convinced she had become the town's errand girl, rather than a courier of wine. Yet everywhere she went, faces that once looked at her with suspicion began to soften. Children followed her, not with jeers but with laughter. The widow pressed her hand in thanks, saying, You've the air of one who knows how to make things happen. And always Gil was near, lending muscle when needed, grinning at the absurdity, and listening to her stories in the evenings. The weight of reputation, word spread. A seamstress who could climb rafters to mend roofs, chase sparrows from haylofts, deliver letters, stitch leather, and fix wheels, was not common in Seward. Soon, townsfolk approached her unbidden. A fisherman asked her to carry a basket of eels upriver, a schoolteacher begged her to teach the children a dance, even the mayor's wife requested a patch upon her favorite gown. Hilsina began to realize that her errand for Clovercrest was no longer secret. Yet instead of suspicion, people spoke her name with a mix of curiosity and respect. She was becoming what she had never intended, a figure of reliability in a town that prided itself on mistrusting strangers. But the barrel still sat in the cooper's storehouse, waiting. The problem of 4. At last, after countless trades and favors, Hilsina and Gil stood again before the wine. The cart was mended, the mule secured, but as they stared at the 4 massive casks, the same question returned, how to lift them? Gil whistled low. Should have thought of that sooner. Together, they rolled the first barrel onto a plank and levered it up into the cart bed. It took an hour, sweat pouring, hands slipping. When it finally thudded into place, they collapsed laughing. 1 down, Hilsina gasped. 3 to go. The second barrel drew the attention of a pair of passing blacksmith apprentices, who, upon hearing her plight, offered help. If she would bring them a jug of the wine later. She agreed. With their strength, 2 more barrels were heaved aboard. The last barrel nearly bested them. It rolled sideways, knocked over a bucket, and almost crushed Gil's foot. Finally, with ropes and much cursing, they wedged it onto the cart. The mule stamped impatiently, as if to say it had not agreed to such nonsense. A new kind of trade. By dusk, the cart creaked under its heavy load. Hilsina wiped her brow, relief flooding her. Yet it was not relief alone. She looked around the square and realized how many faces had helped her, directly or indirectly. Every favor, every errand, every strange request had woven her into the fabric of Seward. She whispered, I came here to buy wine, nothing more. But I've traded my way into something else. Gil heard her and leaned against the cart. Into being the person people come to when they want the impossible done. Hylcina smiled faintly. A purchasing liaison, perhaps. Is that what you call it? It's what I'll make of it, she said. Gil laughed softly. Well then, Mistress Liaison, shall we drive these barrels to wherever they're bound? She nodded, heart quickened not only by the success of the task, but by the strange new future unfolding. Clovercrest awaited, yes, but so too did the realization that she had found a role greater than errand runner, greater even than courier. She was becoming a bridge, a negotiator between worlds that mistrusted each other, and all of it began with poor planning and 4 impossible barrels.